I'm Vennessia Hill. I'm a community relations specialist at Eastpointe, and I'm also an RN. Today, we're going to be talking about grief and mourning. It's not a happy feeling, but during this time that we find ourselves in, it's pretty important that we talk about it. So, when we talk about grief or mourning, that's a bereaved person's internal response to a loss. It could be that we've lost somebody we love, or we get that terminal diagnosis and we have to deal with how we feel about knowing we're going to die. Grief is universal. Everybody feels grief. It's found in most survivors. A lot of times it's lessened the more time that goes on. The survivor adjusts to loss, but they never get back to where they were because you've lost somebody. So it makes sense that you would not be the same. Uh, and there are some survivors that change their identity entirely after a lost one. And there are some people that never get over that grief. They're just stuck there. A lot of times we call that complicated grief. It doesn't happen very often, but when it can be chronic grief. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, that brings it up for me. Everything triggers me. Could be delayed grief. Think about if somebody you loved was in the hospital and they had a baby and they died during childbirth. Now, are you going to take care of that baby? Absolutely. But you may have to put off your grief and mourning because you have a baby to take care of. Are you still sorry? Absolutely, you are. But sometimes there's other things to keep in mind. There's disenfranchised grief. That can take two types. You think about if I've had a miscarriage. Sometimes I don't want to talk about that, and I don't tell people, and I'm grieving by myself. That's a sad time for me, and I don't feel like I can tell you because a lot of people doesn't think of that as a real loss. The other thing when we talk about disenfranchised grief is, what if I love somebody that I'm not supposed to? What if I'm having an affair and something happens? Well, I can't very well say that I love that person, and so that's going to complicate grief. There's an exaggerated grief where I just wail all the time, or I have horrible nightmares. I just can't get over that. And then there's sudden grief. Not that we ever expect somebody to die, but if we get that terminal diagnosis, you kind of ready yourself. But there are people, whether it's a car accident, a heart attack, whatever that is, that we lose them suddenly, and we just, it's such a shock to our system. So the first stage of grief is usually denial or isolation. It's a normal reaction, and it helps us rationalize what's going on. It's a defense mechanism or a blocking mechanism, and it carries us through that first stage of grief. Then we get to the next stage, which is anger. And it's important for me to tell you, when all these stages that I'm going to tell you about, it doesn't go from 1 to 2 to 3. It could go from 1 to 5, back to 3, back to 1. But the second stage is anger, and that usually sets in after we quit denying the fact, or we quit isolating ourselves. But we're not ready for the loss. We could be mad at inanimate objects. It could be that we're mad at friends or the family or the doctor that made the diagnosis. We could even be mad at the person that died. You left me and I'm not happy about it. I'm mad at you for leaving me and the kids. And the other thing is, it can be directed to God. The third stage is bargaining. And that's a normal reaction to the feelings of helplessness that we're going to feel. We're trying to regain control of our lives. It could be that we try to make a deal with God to postpone the inevitable. It could be, if only I had done this, if I'd have got a second opinion, if I'd have went to a different doctor, if I'd have got treatment sooner. Then we go to stage 4 of depression. One stage of depression is like the practical implications. Oh my goodness, how am I going to pay for this funeral? There's cost that surround this. And you think, why are you thinking about money at a time like this? But you have to pay for the burial. So, did we spend enough time with the ones that we love? And then the other one is, how do we say goodbye to our loved one? That's hard. There's no good way to do that. There's not a book that tells us what we're supposed to do or feel. And then the last stage is acceptance. And again, not everybody gets to that stage. They may never get beyond anger or denial. But when we accept, this stage is marked by withdrawal and calm. But it's not the same thing as depression. That's when we start thinking about their life had meaning. Whether it's my life, if I'm dying, or whoever my loved one is, their life had meaning. Crises are normal. We all have crises, but those crises can create opportunities too. We think about Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That organization was started because she lost her daughter to a drunk driver. So that's the opportunities. And as much as we may want to, we can survive somebody's death. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be painful? Yes, but we can survive. And sometimes we get to the place where death has meaning. It's important to know that we can't make somebody go through the grief process quicker. Grief is personal. It's singular. It's like pain. My grief is mine. Your grief is yours. And we may not go through the stages together. It may not be the same for you as it is for me. But one of the most important things that we can do is be there for each other. We need to allow ourselves to feel those feelings. We need to encourage others if they're feeling grief and mourning, that they feel that. It could be that we need to talk to the doctor, whether it's our death or somebody that we love, and see what's going on. Now, there's some myths around dying. Talking about dying is going to upset the person. Most people's going to want to talk about what's happening to them. And they're going to, if I'm the one that's sick, I'm going to worry about you. What if I make you upset? What if you don't want to talk about that? Well, it's a hard discussion, but it still needs to be talked about. The other thing some people think is if I talk about it, they're going to die sooner. There's no research that shows that. It is stressful to talk about, but it can be therapeutic too. The other thing is there are other things to talk about. And some people think if I talk to them about trivial things, I'll offend them. But if we talk to people about what else is going on, that still confirms that I'm living. I'm still alive. And people are going to want to hear what's going on in your life. Think about some people think pets are that's not important. If I'm the one that's dying and I have pets, I want to know who's going to take care of them. I want to know who's going to feed them, who's going to take them out. And so while that's trivial to some people, if that has a lot of meaning to me, we want to make sure that we talk about that. There's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable with silence. They, if the room gets quiet, we have to say something. Silence doesn't have to be awkward. We could just be sitting with somebody, and that's all anybody needs is that physical presence. But it's not easy. So why is talking so difficult? One, I may not want to face the fact that I'm dying. That's not an easy thing to do. We may not have the emotional reserve to handle it. And we could have guilt feelings. Could I have done something different? I should have got them to the doctor. I should have insisted when they said no, they didn't want to go to the doctor. So grief is a very normal response to loss, and everybody grieves in their own way. Don't be afraid to admit to the person who is terminally ill that you're uncomfortable. You may have to ask them, what can I do for you? What do you need? But we don't want to make promises that we can't keep. And the important thing is we need to get support and take care of ourselves too. So if you have those overwhelming thoughts of grief or loss and you need to talk to somebody, please be sure that you take care of yourself. Eastpointe is always open. You can call their number 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. Our number is 800-913-6109. It could be that the different groups have support groups. If you've lost a child, I think it's Compassionate Friends. You can look and find a support group. Eastpointe can help you with that too. It could be that your funeral home can also offer support and offer a group for you. Thank you.